The Wild West is a setting that I think a lot of Assassin's Creed fans would be interested to see, but it's a bit of a controversial take because some people really don't think it could work, and others like me do think that it could make for a good Assassin's Creed game if the challenges that it poses are overcome. The Wild West is an enticing frontier for Assassin's Creed, and it's a setting that fans have speculated about for years. I've seen some really cool concept art in the internet that kind of sparked the idea for this video, and I wanted to discuss whether I think a Wild West AC game would work. So let's discuss it. The allure of the Wild West setting. The Wild West is one of the few historical periods Assassin's Creed hasn't visited in a main game, and it's pretty iconic, so it surprises me that it hasn't really even been in the conversation. To me, the appeal is obvious. A rugged frontier setting with diverse landscapes, both the frontier towns, the vast plains and rocky canyons, and a rich cast of potential characters like gunslingers, Native American warriors, sheriffs, bandits, etc. Many games and films have romanticized the West as a lawless, action-packed era, which in my opinion seems ripe for Assassin's Creed. And this is the first, and in my opinion, most valid reason as to why a Wild West Assassin's Creed game could work, because of its thematic relevance. I imagine a Wild West game being very similar to Assassin's Creed Black Flag in the sense that it would innovate a lot on the core gameplay experience and maybe balance some of the more traditional aspects like parkour and stealth with a higher presence of alternate traversal like riding horses through canyons and different gameplay mechanics that lend themselves to the world better, but at the core is still a true Assassin's Creed game. A lot of people say, for example, that Black Flag is not a real Assassin's Creed game because you're playing most of the time as a pirate. And even though I agree from a gameplay perspective, I don't really agree from a narrative or thematic perspective. I think Assassin's Creed Black Flag is one of the most authentic stories within the Assassin's Creed universe and one that really does focus on the creed. The reason why the pirate setting works so well is because the ideals of lawlessness, of freedom, of violence to dictate your own destiny, and of living out your own personal pursuits resonate pretty heavily with the Assassin's Creed. And this is something that the Wild West would have as well. I imagine a lot of the main characters could be bandits or cowboys that also have this philosophy of wanting personal freedom, not wanting to live by the law, and you could also have a lot of sheriffs that represent the Templar philosophy of wanting control and peace through a series of rules and every now and then violence and punishment. There's a duality between the Wild West themes and usual conversations with the Assassin's Creed themes and philosophies, and that's what I think could make a really interesting, unique and different Assassin's Creed experience to the ones that we've normally had. I really think that Black Flag is the perfect blueprint for this because of how it would overcome challenges that a Wild West setting has as well. So let's explore some of those challenges and how we could resolve them. So the biggest drawback of making an Assassin's Creed game in a Wild West setting is the lack of verticality. This is a problem that I think is incredibly valid, although not that relevant to the modern day philosophy of game design when it comes to Assassin's Creed. There really isn't that much opportunity for parkour, which is one of the core game philosophies or game pillars of Assassin's Creed. I don't really imagine a cowboy assassin running through the rooftops of a certain town because, again, there wasn't a lot of verticality, the streets were pretty wide, there was a lot of open space between the settlements and the towns, and you'd probably spend most of your time traversing on horseback or running around. This, to me, is not the biggest problem in the world because, again, I don't think it immediately sacrifices the identity of Assassin's Creed. The best example of this is Black Flag and AC Origins. In Black Flag, a lot of how you do your traversal has to do with ship navigation, and it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice parkour. There's a lot of good opportunities for parkour in the jungles and in the towns, and in AC Origins, for example, you also spend a lot of your time navigating a lot of open space with your horse. Every now and then you can do parkour in cities, but the parkour is pretty stripped back, and you still have a pretty authentic Assassin's Creed experience. I think that the Wild West game should follow that design philosophy much more closely than, say, Assassin's Creed Unity, for example. If you have a game that follows the inspirations of Assassin's Creed Origins, you give your character a horse, you give it a fun traversal system by putting enough points of interest in the landscape, by giving enough variation to the terrain, and by also giving enough mysteries and side quests and things so that the player doesn't always just want to fast travel from place to place. A lack of parkour availability, though tragic in my opinion because I love third-person parkour, doesn't necessarily mean that something wouldn't make a good Assassin's Creed game. I think that Origins is the perfect blueprint of how this can work, Black Flag as well to a certain extent, and a Wild West game would also follow those cues of just giving you a big open desert, giving you a lot of variation in landscape, and exploring more the narrative relevance of the Assassin's Creed rather than the gameplay relevance of it through parkour. Stealth, I think, could work as well. Obviously, you have revolvers and guns and duels, but it's still a setting in which a hidden blade and sneaking around can still work very well. There's a not very popular stealth game called Desperados, which, even though it hasn't sold as much as the developers would have liked, is very well reviewed and is a great stealth game that's set in the Wild West. So if you haven't played that game, I recommend that you check it out, but it's a game that kind of shows that stealth is viable in the Wild West, even if you have to innovate a little bit in terms of what stealth tools you give the player. I imagine that you'd need something like a whip and a gun, but maybe the gun can be silenced. You can obviously have your hidden blade. I don't know why throwing knives wouldn't be something that you could use. I think that it could be. No one was really wearing any sort of armor that would stop that from happening. And yeah, I think that stealth is definitely a viable thing that you can put in a Wild West game, and obviously combat would much more focus on gunplay. But again, we've had a game in a similar time period, which is Victorian London, and the fact that everyone had revolvers didn't really kind of damage that gameplay experience at all. So the setting ridding you a little bit of parkour I don't think causes a big issue, but I do want to explore where this Wild West game would stand in the lore and what our protagonist would look like. It's already been confirmed that there was Templar activity during this period of time, and there have been protagonists and characters around the kind of years in which the Wild West exists, which is roughly from the 1860s to the 1890s. I can imagine that the AC Wild West game could follow an assassin protagonist in the 1870s or 1880s, dealing with the fallout of the Civil War. Perhaps the Brotherhood, weakened by earlier conflicts, sends a lone assassin to the frontier to disrupt Templar schemes in the West. The franchise could draw on real history, as it likes to do, for example, the displacement of Native American nations, the rise of robber barons, and the lawlessness in territories, to craft that classic Templar versus assassin conflict. There was this almost religious notion that Americans had called manifest destiny, which was a belief that the Americans were fated to conquer the West. It could be a Templar-fueled ideology that would warrant a lot of the corruption and power abuse that you could have in that time period, and you could have the assassin probably side with the natives or try and unravel the Templar mystery behind this manifest destiny agenda. So I think the narrative is something that could really easily be figured out by the writers. I think, again, the themes of the Wild West marry perfectly with the themes of Assassin's Creed, and there's no real challenge here to make it kind of have a duality or parallelism that is relevant to the Creed and its themes. So let's explore the gameplay a little more, because I touched on some ideas earlier, but I want to delve deeper into how we would design Western gameplay for Assassin's Creed. Translating the familiar AC gameplay into Wild West setting would require pretty careful design, but it's absolutely feasible. We've already discussed and in my opinion resolved the issue with no parkour friendly cities, although I do want to say that there were some settlements around this time that did have pretty fleshed out cities that could give you that satisfying roof hopping experience. San Francisco is probably the best example of this. Another cool gameplay feature that I imagine is train heists. Trains can become like a moving parkour element and a set piece that could lead into some sort of stealth mission within the train. I also imagine that one exciting mechanic could be the bounty system. In historical reality, bounty hunters and wanted posters were a big part of the West. For Assassin's Creed, this could translate to some sort of notoriety system. If you're too careless and make a spectacle of an assassination, you might become a wanted outlaw. Then, as you roam the open world, bounty hunters might track you, forcing you to either evade, hide out, or confront them. This kind of takes inspiration from the boss system that we have in the RPG games, where once you create enough of a wanted level, these mercenaries come and find you, but instead of a mercenary, it could be some sort of bounty hunter, and you have to duel them in a gun duel, or hunt them down, or just hide away because they'll just kill you with a gun. It could also lead to a good social stealth development, where you could figure out how to create disguises so that bounty hunters don't know how to find you, so you can go into a certain town with a disguise, and even though you're technically wanted, once you're wearing that disguise, you can be anonymous for the remainder of the mission. I think that the main issue and the biggest threat to a Wild West Assassin's Creed is not the gameplay, it's not the lack of parkour, obstacles, or cities, it's not the story. Main reason that I think a Wild West game would be difficult to achieve is because it would undoubtedly be compared to Red Dead Redemption 2, and that is just a standard that Ubisoft will never be able to meet. No matter how many years they spend on this game, the game will never be as good as Red Dead Redemption 2. The writing won't be as good, the gameplay won't be as good, the world won't be as fleshed out, and it's a bit of an issue because usually what makes Assassin's Creed unique and kind of makes an excuse for some of the less polished gameplay elements is the fact that it has such a different gameplay formula. The fact that it focuses so much on third-person parkour, on stealth, on some of these things that can't very easily be replicated, means that you can have an Assassin's Creed game that's not as good as another game in that setting, but can still be sold and not compared. But as we mentioned, Ubisoft would kind of have to not rely too much on parkour because there's not that many options to do it. You would have to use gun combat, and there you'd be immediately compared to third-person shooting games like you have in, GTA and Red Dead Redemption. But also the writing. If you have to focus on the narrative and look for parallelisms between the Wild West and the Assassin's Creed, you clearly have to pay a lot of attention and really prioritize the narrative. And there's no universe in which a Ubisoft game will beat Red Dead Redemption 2 in terms of narrative. It's just not really going to happen. So I think that a Wild West Assassin's Creed game could work as a main game or as a side game. There's a lot of incredibly exciting gameplay opportunities when it comes to train heists, stealth, bounty hunting, disguises and social stealth, and also just playing as a cool cowboy assassin. But the reason why I don't think it's going to happen is because if Ghost of Tsushima was hard enough to kind of live up to with Assassin's Creed Shadows, and a lot of people don't think it did live up to it, I cannot imagine how an open world Wild West game would do when it comes to comparing it with an older game that still is better than most games coming out today. So let me know what you think, and if there would be a solution to making the Wild West Assassin's Creed game unique enough that it can't be compared to Red Dead Redemption, or if you just think that the Wild West Assassin's Creed game is just something that's cool to think about but not very feasible to make into a full game. If you're interested in seeing my other ideas for cool settings within Assassin's Creed, you can watch this video now.